Hello, welcome to Math for All, where we try to make math creative, curious, and inclusive for everyone. I'm Molly Volke.
I'm Heidi Sipnani. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. We're really excited about our conversation.
Mhm.
Um, if you don't have this book yet in your library, you will want to add it, Bad at Math. And we're going to be speaking with the author this evening. So we're so excited. If you would like, you can follow us on Facebook and on Twitter or X, whatever we're calling it now, and
Oh,
YouTube. So YouTube is probably the easiest place to follow along, and make sure that you always have free PD with amazing educators coming right to your computer screen.
yes, yes. We are super excited for our conversation today. And Heidi and I were just saying that I feel like we've had a theme going so far this season. So we're going to be talking to Lidia Gonzalez, and her question today is, how does one attend to student identity in the mathematics classroom? So I am going to introduce Lydia. Lidia Gonzalez is a professor in the Department of Mathematics and Computer Science at York College. A first generation college graduate, she began her career as a high school mathematics teacher in a large, comprehensive high school in New York City. Interested in improving the mathematical experiences of urban students, she focuses her research on the teaching of mathematics for social justice, the development of mathematics identity, and teacher development. She lives in Brooklyn, New York with her partner and their 9-year-old daughter. So let's bring Lydia in.
Hello.
Hello. Welcome.
Thank you. It's
Welcome.
nice to be here.
Yeah.
We are so excited to speak with you. When I saw the title of your book a while back before it was even out, and I was like, oh, well, we're pre-ordering. So this is a really personal topic with me as well. And so I'm just super
Mhm.
excited to talk about it. But before we get to that, we always like to start with, what is your math story? And so that if people don't know you or your work, they can learn a little bit more about you.
Sure. So I always really enjoyed math. The problems felt like puzzles to me. And like when you kind of have a little trouble with it or you're playing around with it for a while and you finally figure out something that works, you get this kind of little rush of like, oh wow, now I get it. And that felt really good to me. So in my mind, I was like, well, if I can help other people feel that, that would be good. So from like a pretty young age, like sixth grade or so, I was like, I'm going to be a teacher. But then I went back and forth. It was either going to be math or biology because I really liked science too. But in the ninth grade, I had this math teacher who like kind of picked up on the fact that like, I didn't know a lot of people. I didn't always want to sit by myself in the lunchroom. And so on the days where like I hung around a little, she was like, "Come, you can hang out. Let's do some stuff." And so she gave me like extra math problems and little puzzles. And there was a museum of math out on Long Island in New York that ran a contest. And so I wrote a song for the contest, and she told me about that. And I started, tutoring other students
Wait,
that
you
were in
wrote a
different
song?
grades. Yeah, it was really like funny because I started playing the guitar in ninth grade, and this was in ninth grade, so I knew like four chords. I just that's all I did, and I actually won that. There were different contests, right? Like there were different things to do, and so there was a music one, and I won the music one. So like my picture is in like some local newspaper from our town
That's awesome.
with all the other students, which was kind of nice. But I got to do things that were fun and revolved around math and weren't necessarily just typical textbook problems. And so that's when I was like, yeah, this is what I'm going to study. So I went to NYU for my undergrad, and I studied math education for grade 7 through 12. And then while I was there, I sort of started enjoying just solving kind of a little like non-traditional problems. And I thought, wow, maybe I want to solve math problems like for a living. I might want to do that. So when I graduated, I applied to the master's program in pure math, and I went that way.
Wow.
And that just didn't work out.
Oh, bless
um,
you.
I just there was a combination of things. Like one was walking into the room where you're like the only American born woman was
Mhm.
like not I was like, wow, okay, I don't really feel like I fit in. And then at the same time, I actually ended up getting really sick the first semester, so I had to withdraw from my classes. And as someone that does really well, like did
Mhm.
really well in school, this was like a really big deal. And I was like, I don't know that I want to go back there. So I went to the math education program. And so when I finished, I started as a high school math teacher. And I'm really glad that happened because I love teaching and it was a lot of fun. And yes, there were some crazy days. And yes, well, I was in a very disorganized school. But like the students were awesome and there was some really good things that happened. But like I said, the school was very disorganized. And so I might have a student in my class for 3 weeks and then they would disappear.
Wow.
And then another student would show up and I'd say, "Well, what happened?" "Well, they had me sitting in geometry for 3 weeks, but I'm really supposed to be in pre-cal." And I was like,
Mm.
okay. So there's this thing on the board called a matrix. Have you seen that before? No. And then it's like, oh, okay. So I just sort of felt like we could do better. And that was just one example, but there were other things going on at the school where I felt like we're, if I had kids, which I didn't at the time, I wouldn't want to send them there. And
Mhm.
that didn't feel right. So then I said, you know what, maybe I go back to school and I start studying like, why is this even happening? Like, why are students being treated this way? Or what are ways we can attend to things better? How can we do a better job of this? So I ended up at the CUNY Graduate Center. CUNY is a city university of New York in their urban education program. And then I did my dissertation around teaching math for social justice. And then I ended up joining the faculty at York College, which is also part of the City University of New York. I get to teach math classes to people that want to be teachers. So I'm in the math department, but I'm like the math ed person in the math department. So I get to teach math classes to people that want to be teachers, but we don't have like enough of those for that to be my full schedule. So I also teach math classes to math majors. Like I usually do a history of math class.
Oh,
And then we don't have enough of those. So every now and again, I get some random class like pre-calc or calc one. Or this semester, I'm teaching a math for social justice class, which is kind of fun,
Oh, how
which is
cool is
neat.
that?
Yeah, we just started it 3 semesters ago as an option for students that don't need a particular math class for their major. Like you don't need
yeah.
statistics or you don't need whatever. So there's music majors and English majors and art history majors and a few random students that thought it sounded good, even though it doesn't fulfill any requirements for them. So I appreciate them as well. But it's,
Really?
it's been really nice. Yeah.
That's very cool.
Mhm.
My daughter is in an education program and she's a junior. She's already done with all of her education math classes and that those fulfilled her requirement. But she didn't
Mhm.
have anything cool like that to
Yeah, it's
take,
new,
like even if
and
she
so
wanted to take something else to further
yeah,
that. Mm.
so it's new, so it fulfills like the one math class you have to take for all those majors, but it's also going to be part of the middle school math
Oh,
program for teachers in middle school. It's just that literally just started, so I don't know that we have any students like far enough along to get to it. But it's going to be part of that program too.
That's really cool. How fun.
no. Yes. Sorry. Just
Only we think that's really fun, right? Well, I hope not, but
I
no.
mean, yeah, it is.
Yeah,
We were,
no.
we were talking about percent change, and we were looking at. I started out with if your coffee goes up $4, are you going to be annoyed? And they said yes. So
Mhm.
what if your tuition goes up $4 next semester? And they're like, that's no problem. I said, all right, why are you annoyed about the coffee? It's the same $4. But then they got really into it, and we were looking at representation in the Senate. So the number of
Oh,
like
sure.
African American senators in 2011, I think, was 0, and then 2021 it was 2, and so we looked at like that, and one student said, "What about gas? Can you do this for gas? Like the price of gas?" And I'm like, "Yeah, we can do it." So we looked it up, and it's really nice because they get to connect to things that are a little bit different, and that hopefully mean something to them.
Yeah. Do you have kind of, this is so kind of not on topic, but like, is there a specific curriculum? I just haven't heard of one of these classes. So I'm wondering, do you get to make it up or what?
I get to make it up. There isn't like a textbook, right? There isn't like, here's a textbook. So there's
Right.
there's a website called radicalmath.org, which has a lot of data sets and lessons. There's a couple of books that have come out
recently.
Wow, I wish I could remember the names
Slow
perfectly.
reveal graphs would be good for that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's fun.
There's something called like lessons and activities around math for social justice in the high school curriculum. And I think Barry is one of the authors.
Yes, I think you are correct. And Dr. Liu, I think, might be too. I probably have it.
Yeah, there's more than one. That's the only one I remember right now. But yeah. So there are pockets of information, but there's not like, here's a textbook, you just have to follow that.
Right.
Which is nice because you get to play around.
Well, and it makes it more relevant to whoever you have in front of you as well. So you can really tailor the work that you're doing to the students in your class and what might be the most meaningful to them for how they can, advocate and look at things in different ways. So
that's really cool. I'm impressed and also jealous a little bit. All right. Well, that kind of leads us right here, I think, right? So
I think it does, yeah.
Yeah. So how does one attend to student identity in the mathematics classroom?
I mean, you just finished saying, right, the fact that there's no fixed set of lessons that I have to run through means that I can see who's in the class and maybe craft some math around things that are interesting to them. That's part of it. And basically the idea is that who we are matters. And so the experiences we have, the history that we have just shapes how we see things and how we interpret things and how we learn and how we teach and all the rest of it. So if we really want to engage students, we sort of have to try to understand where they're coming from and build upon the experiences and the identities that they bring into the classroom.
Yeah. So in your book, you talk about like dismantling beliefs around mathematics in the mathematics classroom. And I was thinking about this. I was at a school council meeting last night, and the number of times I heard parents and educators in the room who were not like part of the math department say, oh, well, I was a good student except for math, or I always understood what I was doing well, but not math, but we're not going to talk about that. Like I would have been really rich by the end of that 2-hour meeting if I had kept, gotten a little money for every time I heard someone say that in that space where we're all there to talk about like the education of children in our care and in this case, high schoolers. And can you talk a little bit about how those mindsets can be so damaging and what we do about that, I guess is.
Yeah, I hear that all the time. So from parents, when I was teaching at the high school, your child is struggling with this concept. I was never really good at math anyway. From people that I work with who, like, by all accounts are smart, accomplished people, right? They have terminal degrees in their field, but they'll turn around and say they're not good at math. Unfortunately, a lot of the students in my math for elementary school teachers class over the years also come in with this, I'm not very good at this. And it's, on the one hand, it's just troubling because we have all this idea of like, oh, everybody's able to learn math. Everybody can do this. And we're gonna throw some new curriculum here. We're gonna try some new ideas so that everybody gets it. But at the same time, you're living in a society where it's perfectly okay to say you're not good at it. So I don't know how we get to the point of making it so everyone could be good at it, but have this belief that it's okay not to be. Like, those two things don't seem to work well together. Like there's a problem there.
It's reinforced everywhere though too, right? Like if if you just looked at movies,
Mhm.
I mean, you could probably find a zillion examples that
Yeah,
are
like mhm.
saying,
when
we're not good at math, or I'm not good
when
at math, or there's no reason to even bother doing that math, blah blah blah.
when there's a student or someone struggling with school in the movie and they pan in on what they're doing, it's always math. It's never like, oh, I don't get music, or oh, I don't get right. And
Right.
then with my classes, especially with the classes for future educators, I happen to I misspell things all the time.
Mhm.
Like, so I'll misspell something and someone will catch it. Oh, you spelled that wrong. And then I go, you know what? I was never really good at spelling. And then they just look at you like, wow, did she say that out loud? And then I'm like, wait a minute, you can tell me you're not good at math, but it's
Mhm.
not okay for me to say I'm not good at spelling, and then we kind of have that conversation. But yeah, it's
Are
damaging
you
because
really
it
bad
gives
at
you a way
spelling?
out. Every now and again, I spell something wrong.
Oh, I spell things wrong all the time.
Like,
Just curious.
Yeah.
Just curious.
it's not like terrible, but yeah, it happens probably more often than I'd like.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I hear you.
Yeah.
Um,
I hear you.
you
Me
know,
today was spelling scissors.
there you go. Every
Oh,
now and again, it's not even a hard word. It's just
Yeah,
it
I'm
just
like,
yes,
doesn't look right.
I know. As if the spelling has changed or something like
yeah.
that.
Yeah,
Does
okay, so you don't spell it right or whatever,
Mhm.
and then you just turn around and you look it up, or you ask
Yes.
someone, or you do something about it. But when we go, I'm not good at math, then that gives us an okay to sort of push the problem aside. I'm not good at this. I don't have to do it.
Mhm.
I don't have to work on it. Well, you're never going to get any better if you don't work on it.
Mhm.
Like, so if we turned around and said, I'm not good at math yet, then that would be different, right? Because then it
Mhm.
was like, okay, if I put in the work, maybe I don't put in the work, so I never actually get better at it, but I still know that I could. Like
Mhm.
there's a
Mhm.
path forward. But if we kind of go, oh yeah, I'm not good at this, and that leads us to not do the things that would help us be good at it, then yeah, we're never going to get better at it. We're just reinforcing the
Mhm.
thing there. Um,
Yeah.
Yeah.
but I also think people are better at it than they think. No, because I think that not everybody, but you ask people what math and they're like what math is, and they're like, oh, it's solving equations, or it's multiplying big numbers, and so we have this kind of narrow view of what actually math, like, this is what math is. It's very narrow. It's sort of
Mhm.
like the stuff we did in school that was kind of very like rote or whatever. um, but really, you go to the supermarket and you're putting the stuff in the shopping cart and you want to make sure everything fits, and that's math. Right? It's like a
Mhm.
bin packing problem. Like, people actually study that.
Yeah.
Or I don't know, you like are braiding someone's hair, like you're braiding your child's hair. Well, there's lots of different ways you can do that, and there's a whole area of math called like knot theory and braid theory, and that's math.
There's a
But
braid
nobody
theory.
thinks that. Yeah, so you can make knots, but you can also make braids, like
Oh.
Oh,
over, under, like that kind of stuff.
fun.
But I don't know, like, there's just so much stuff that we do that is math,
Mhm.
but we don't count it. So I think that also makes it harder for us to think that
Yeah, I
we
think
are
you're
good
right
at it.
about that because I think there are certain things that are like, known for their math, like baking, right? Like we
Yeah,
can
that's true.
practice fractions
Hmm.
in baking like every day if we wanted to. And people will iterate fractions in baking, but don't
Mhm.
understand the idea of iterating fractions when they're using them to do actual mathematics in the classroom. It's
Mhm.
just not how it's related. And I definitely think that my brother-in-law, he was not a good student according to him, and he was so good at fractions because he was a builder. And I
Mhm.
Hmm.
remember when I first was with my husband, I was tutoring him because he was taking some math classes, and I was tutoring him. And then years later, he built a shed in my backyard, and I saw all the little fraction work that he was doing in pencil on the wood. And I was like, do you know how many people don't know how to do that? And you think you're a bad student? Like, it's so much about perception and what you
Hmm.
believe and what you think math is. It's so
Mhm.
many, but that's so many things just right there.
Yeah. Yeah, no, definitely.
I don't know
I
how
mean,
you
sometimes
interact with the rest of the world.
an idea is like just challenge people to like tell me something you did today that doesn't have anything to do with math.
Mhm.
And almost always, whatever they say, you can find something. Which,
I'm gonna
yeah,
try
that's
that.
fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Well, and I think, so often like school math, like you were saying, is
Mm.
different than
Mhm.
math. That's not the, like, not that school math doesn't lead to some understanding and access to other kinds of math, but the way that we all learned, I was working with a group of teachers today, and I have a real wide range of years in the classroom. So like everything from a
Mhm.
year or two away from retirement to like brand new baby teacher. And so the and it's still surprising to me that my younger teachers are still often,
Mhm.
not always, but still often coming in with procedure and
Mhm.
algorithm understanding only and lack of flexibility and like all of those things. And so we were working through a number of ways of working with students in first and second grade today, and just like having that conversation. And a number of people were just like, well, but I just don't think of it that way. This is
Mhm.
just how you think about it. And I was like, okay, I'm like in between ages of quite a few of you. This is not how I learned school.
Right.
Like, let's be really clear that this is
Mhm.
not how I learned in school. I did not learn this until I was in my 30s, I would say,
Mhm.
like,
Mhm.
well, in, like mid 30s when I started like reteaching myself, because I was not a math teacher originally. And so like reteaching myself how to do the school math, right? That
Yeah.
I had been forced to learn or memorize, and my understanding around it was because I was not fast at it and I'm not a good
Right.
memorizer.
Speed.
That
Yeah.
yeah, that was then thus I was not good at, right?
Yeah, that was
And
the number.
it's challenging in that like I still have to think through these things. I told him, I was like, I come prepared to work with you on these lessons. I looked at them. It's not that the quote unquote math is hard for first and
Mhm.
second grade at this point, but how kids are learning and developmentally thinking about it is challenging to think about all the different ways that they could look at it. And I need to
Mhm.
know like what those ways might be before I come to work with you on it. And so just that understanding that it's okay to go back and learn these things too.
Mm.
Yeah.
And
No,
what
we knew how to multiply because we memorized the multiplication tables.
Yeah.
That was it. I know what 7 times 6 is because I memorized it.
Mhm.
But now I watch my daughter's 9, and I watch her do math. And like, let's say she has 7 times 6.
Mhm.
She'll say, well, I don't know what 7 times 6 is, but 7 times 7 is 49 because I know my doubles back. So it's just like I can just subtract
One
from there.
less than that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or the other thing that's really neat is she'll use an old problem to solve a new problem.
Mhm.
So I already did 7 times 5, and
Mhm.
now I need to do 7 times 6, so I can work with that.
Yeah.
I can go to the old problem and do it. So they reason things out in ways that are really neat and really exciting.
But like
But it's
even the
hard
word
for
that you
people that
just
didn't
used,
learn there.
even the
What
word
word?
that you just used, reasoned,
Right,
Mhm.
right, right.
was not a thing
No, there
for
was a
us.
space for the answer, and sometimes we were timed. So you had to
Oh,
do them
always.
fast,
Yeah.
and that was that. There was no
Mhm.
room for figuring out. Um,
Right.
but yeah, it's nice to see, but it is a lot harder to work with, especially if you weren't taught
Mhm.
that way.
Mhm.
And also just sometimes students just come up with really amazing connections and really amazing ways of thinking. And if we're so stuck in ours that we go, no, that's not how you do it.
Yeah.
And then kind of like erase that and start over. Then like we could have really helped that student and
Mhm.
maybe all the other students around them, and maybe we would have come up with a really neat pattern that always works, or a really neat approach that has some benefit.
Yeah,
So yeah, definitely.
I was talking to a teacher today who is a middle school special ed teacher, and she's been doing choral counting with
Mhm.
her students. And she said to me, she said, there's an awful lot of relationships that go diagonal. And and I was like, yeah, every time I see an example of choral counting, there is a diagonal line in there doing something. It doesn't even matter what the count was, but I thought it was such a funny observation for her to make, but it comes also from a place of learning for her, right?
Mhm.
She's not bad at math. She's a math teacher, but here's something that she's never done before, and she's noticing these cool things, and she's noticing them from lesson to lesson, which I just feel like there's not enough appreciation for teacher learning. Teachers feel that they have to know everything.
Yeah, that's the other thing. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's wonderful when somebody asks a question and I go, you know what? I really have no idea.
yeah,
Like, do you want to play around with it and see if we
yeah.
can figure it
let's
out?
let's try to figure it out.
Yeah.
Yeah, like this whole
Yeah,
idea of just getting comfortable playing with the math
Mhm.
is kind of nice.
yeah. And what a gift it is to your students to see you respond in that way,
That's
because
true.
that is not that's not what I ever saw in any of my math teachers. I'm
Mhm.
not really sure if I could think about that in other subject areas, but I know for sure that I didn't have vulnerable math teachers that were going to say, I don't know, ever. And probably they never ever gave me a problem that they didn't know.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
But then, like, but then what are we? What are we
Yeah.
teaching? That you're
Yeah.
just supposed to know all this stuff, and like to be good at it means that you know all these things, and that's that, and not that like you can explore questions that maybe you don't know, and that maybe you play around with for weeks and
Mhm.
don't get anywhere with, and
Well, but
that's
that's what
fine.
real mathematicians do, right? I mean, these
Yeah, I mean sometimes centuries go by before anything gets
right
gets
people
accomplished.
die solving
Right.
problems.
Exactly.
And not because they're solving problems.
No, but
Yeah.
centuries later, they're still work and the nice thing there is that sometimes whatever the problem is, hundreds of years go by and it doesn't get solved, but in working at it, other things get figured
Mhm.
out, like other
Right.
relationships come to light, other little whatever,
Yeah.
are developed. So, if we could also find ways to give our students problems that take a little longer to figure out,
Mhm.
or if they ask a question that isn't, well, that's not in my curriculum, then, it's nice if you have a little space to go off on a little tangent and do some exploring,
Yeah.
and,
Yeah,
and in terms of identity, if the question comes from them, they
Mhm.
might be more interested in doing that than the question you might
for
throw
sure.
out.
Mhm.
For sure. For sure. Yeah. Uh,
So,
I feel like we could talk about this
yeah.
particular thing for like 7 hours.
when when you consider, I'm probably opening this can of worms and maybe shouldn't in this space, but when we consider like math is like a gatekeeper subject,
Yeah, agreed.
how do you counsel or
Hmm.
help both teachers or administrators or fellow parents or like think about this subject in particular um, as a gatekeeper to other areas? And I don't, you know, I'm not exactly sure.
Well, I think I don't know if what you mean is this, Heidi, but like for sure, if you don't take calculus by, you're not going to be an engineer, or you know what I mean, like something like that. Is that what you mean?
Well, and just like how early we segregate students
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
in
That's true too.
in spaces that like and it's one of the spaces where we feel more comfortable doing that at an earlier grade level than like other things. Like other things you might have, like, you could do the extra reading and get into AP English over, after a summer or something. But in math, we almost consider it sometimes as a badge of honor that, oh, well, our subject is.
Right. And if you want to graduate from high school, there's a math exam. If you want to get into college, there's a math exam. Certain civil service jobs, you have to pass a math exam, right? So if I usually joke around and say, like, if dancing was held in this regard, then I wouldn't have my job, right? Because that's not the thing I'm good at. But luckily, I was good at the thing that society values, so I got to go through and have access to whatever. But it's a little tricky because on the one hand, like, especially with the math for social justice ideas, on the one hand, let's use math to explore real social issues and try to advocate for some change around them. But on the other hand, I know the students in front of me won't get to the next place if they don't learn this stuff. So until it changes, until like what we value changes, I kind of feel like I have to address both. And that's really hard just because there's a lot.
It's unfortunate. It was something that you just said struck me. Like, it's interesting because the systems that all math teachers, all teachers live in are structured by someone who likely is not a math teacher, may not have a particular value in math necessarily, right? Like the structures of the school and how courses are set up and all of that stuff. And we don't, like, we're the ones charged with like trying to create mathematicians and trying to make people love math, but the structures that we have to work in may not be conducive necessarily for that to be super successful. I feel like the math community that Heidi and I like go to as many conferences as we can, and it's super energizing, and we're always meeting people who are like-minded with us or at least aligned with this whole idea of building math identity and inviting everyone to the table. And we still all operate in these structures that are not super permissible to it. Like if we could all create our own that's crazy to even say, but like create our own curriculum so that it was super interesting for kids.
Right.
It would
or
be
it was
amazing.
built based on who was in your classroom, so that yours might look different than mine because you're working with students that are different than mine in some way, interested in something different or seeing the world in a different way because of where they come from or what their experiences are. There's that really nice study by the researcher named William F. Tate IV, I believe. And he was looking at a class of students, and because I'm from New York, I'm going to call them Metro cards, right? So my background is that the card you use on the subway is called a Metro card, but it wasn't in New York. But the students were given a problem where they had to decide whether it made more sense to buy a card where you pay for each ride as you go, or a card where you can use it for the whole week and you can use it as many times as you like. And they gave them the price of each. And then the students were told that their parent, one parent was using, or a parent was using this card to go to and from work. And so the right answer was that the pay as you go was better. But this was based on the fact that the teacher was thinking that the parent was going to and from work once a day. So once in, once out, 5 days a week, 10 trips. A lot of the students were getting it wrong because they were saying that they should buy the weekly card. But when the researchers started doing a little digging, they found out that some of the students in the class had parents that worked multiple jobs. So they weren't making 10 trips a week, they were making more than that. Others had parents who share the card, right? So I go to work, I use the card, and then I pass it off to my child so that they can go play basketball with their friend, a couple of subway stops away or whatever. So they were putting more trips into it than 10. And so they were doing the math right, but like who they were was coloring how they were understanding the problem. And this
That
happens all the time.
is so interesting. And you got that wrong because your life is different than mine.
Yeah.
Ah,
I mean,
wow.
it's like thinking about, you know, like the systems that we're in and how we allow opportunities for that. And I think that's the part that makes it critical. Not only, and I struggle with this. Sometimes a teacher asked once, you know, well, why are we learning about this particular waterfall in whatever country? Like, I'm not from there, or like these kids aren't from there. I was like, well, some of it is some math we try and make relevant to the world that they live in. So let's use things that we have in our classroom or in our community or in our home.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm also doing a disservice if I'm not opening them up to other cultures and other ways of looking and other ways of thinking about life and mathematics and just the ways that we live in other spaces. And you know, it's that, and it's not just one or the other.
Right.
It's both, and
Yeah.
providing both of those opportunities, not just like to consider the mathematics that we do in our own world, but then the mathematics that gives us access to other spaces that might also just be really interesting, or gives us access in places that we wouldn't normally have it.
But like even that problem is so interesting, right? Because I'm doing a lot of work right now with building thinking classrooms, and so there's you know, like everyone else in the world,
That's a
and there's
wonderful
just
book.
there's just so much discussion involved in this that I don't know that a teacher would be able to miss that now. Like if you were committed to building thinking classrooms, that conversation would have come out and you would have known why that group of kids solved that problem in that way, because you would have heard their discussion saying, well, my dad went to work 3 times today, or you know, whatever. You would have been able to account for that somehow.
Yeah. And then there's also that when you do that, so you bring up the question of, wait, so now under what conditions is this one better than that one, or that one better than this one? And so
Yes.
all of a sudden it's not like, oh, the answer is whatever. It's, well, the answer depends on how you're defining these things, and
Which is
now
super
we can have
real.
this, and you're having a nice rich conversation about math where it isn't just like the answer is 5, you know, which unfortunately sometimes people say, well, I like math because like there's always one right answer.
Yes.
There's no like wiggle room. It's just cut and dry. And it's like, well, it depends on the questions you're asking.
Right. And it depends on whether or not you're applying it to something that's actually real, because in real life that you don't make decisions just based on one number. There's always something that's going to impact it. Well, in this case I would do this, and in this case I would do this.
Yeah. I mean, if we go, you know, what's 2 plus 3, then it's like, okay, 5, you know. But if the question is, what numbers can you add? What 2 numbers can you add together to get 5? Then all of a sudden there's more discussion. There's like a little bit more to play around with. So I think how we allow for discussions to come up and questions to come up, and how we craft our questions, definitely we have to be careful and open to, you know, when someone asks a good question, let's follow. Let's see where that goes.
Yeah. Well, also like allowing discussion in your class is pretty necessary for that. So gotta be a little bit of growth here, people. You're gonna have to start discussing things.
That's kind of I mean, it's a little funny, right? So at the high school, you do spend a decent amount of time trying to get students to talk less because they're talking all the time. You want them talking about math. So I love it when there's noise. Like I don't want you sitting there quiet. But sometimes it's like, okay, like focus. We're working on some math. So when I moved to teaching at the college, it's like the complete opposite. They just sit there quietly with their notebooks open, like ready to go. And I ask a question, and it's like, not talking to myself. Like, I want you to answer, or I'll put like chart paper around the room and I'm like, all right, everybody up. And they just look at
Yeah.
you like, I have to stand up. I'm like, yep, you have to stand up.
Mm-hmm.
So it takes a little while, a couple weeks in, and then everybody's comfortable again. But in the beginning, it's sort of like, no, you're teaching us math. Don't you just jabber a little at the board and then we write it down. And then we go home and then we do some problems. It's like,
Yeah.
no, no, we're not doing it that way.
Yep.
But
Learning
it would be
curve.
terrible, right? If it would be tolerable if I lecture a bunch of pre-service teachers and then tell them like, okay, so I'm going to lecture you in math, but when you become teachers, don't do
Right.
this.
Don't do that.
Right.
That's just terrible.
Right.
So I bring in manipulatives for them to play with, and we stand up and write stuff on the board together in groups or whatever it is. Do you know the locker problem?
Yes.
I
All right,
think so.
so there's 1,000 lockers in a row. There's 1,000
It's
students
been a
lined
long
up.
time for me. I'm
It's an
not
old
going to
one,
lie
yeah.
about that. It's not a new problem.
So the lockers are all closed. The first student goes by, opens all the lockers. The second student goes by. The second student touches the second, the fourth, the sixth, the eighth, and they close them. The third student touches the third, the sixth, the ninth, the 12th. If it's open, they close it. If it's closed, they open it. And then the idea is after all 1,000 students go by, which lockers remain open.
Mm-hmm.
And so we did that problem, I think, 2 classes ago. And there weren't a lot of students in class that day. I'm not quite sure why. I don't remember if it was like lousy weather or good weather, or like it's the middle of the semester, so people are struggling a little. And
Mm-hmm.
so I was like, you know what? I was going to break you into groups, but there's not that many of you. Let's just do it together. And somebody said, well, can I get up and write on the board? Yeah, go for it. So they spent a good hour on this,
Mm-hmm.
but they were like talking about it the whole time, different ideas, different this. Every now and again, I would like throw something in there, but mostly it was them working on it. It was really nice to see. But then you're talking about like the structures we work in. How many teachers have an hour to devote to a problem like that? I mean, there are ways, right? I can take
There
what
are
I
ways,
would
but
lecture and throw it into a video that I ask you to watch instead. So I free up some time that way. But there is still like this structure that makes some of this stuff challenging, especially if you're new and you're
Mm-hmm.
worried about doing the things you're supposed to be doing.
yeah. And it depends on who your administrators are and what they're
Oh,
saying
totally.
to you.
Yeah, totally.
But you're super right about the new thing too. Fear of not finishing, which is hysterical because I think teachers live in a land, at least math teachers do, live in a land of fearing not finishing their program, but yet never finishing their program, but living in fear of it constantly. Like,
Yeah.
I never once finished all of my chapters. Are you crazy? Who's going to be able to do all of that? It's too much.
And if I finished 20, but they didn't understand half of it, but I got to
Right.
the end of 20,
I know.
does that even matter? Would it have been better to do 15? Like,
Right. I said
it's
the
the
other
end of the
day
world.
because somebody was saying that to me. They were like, well, we have to fit. And I said, if we just teach kids to think, we don't have to teach them everything.
Mm-hmm.
There's no way we can teach them everything they're going to need to know anyway. Like the students in my classes are going to be teachers in, let's say, I don't know, as little as 2 years or maybe as many as 4, 5, or 6. The curriculum might have changed 5 times by
Right.
then, right? But if they're comfortable, like a little more comfortable with the math than when they walked in, if they're a little more confident, they're know where to go to look for certain things. Then that's the stuff that matters. Not like
Agreed.
I know these, 10 facts now.
Right.
Right.
Because those are the only ones that are important.
Right.
And you don't practice them and you forget them anyway, right?
Right.
I took German in college. I don't speak with anybody. I pretty much know how to say I know how to say I took German in college, and I know how to say I don't know very much German. But like most of it, I don't remember anymore because I didn't practice.
Right.
But what matters is that, like, okay, there's this structure to language, and if I really wanted to, I could go back and relearn it. I don't know.
No, you're right. You're right. Well, Lydia, why don't you tell people how they can learn more about you and the work that you do?
Oh, okay. So I guess you can learn more about me I work at York College, which is part of the City University of New York. There's actually a York College in Pennsylvania and a York College in Canada. We are not that York College.
Oh,
So you see
wow.
that URL on the bottom there. If you go there, that's my page at work, and it has all of my articles and the classes I teach and this, that, and the other thing. It also has my email, which is, well, I could rattle it off. It's lgonzalez at york.cuny.edu, so you can definitely do that. I have a Twitter account, but I am very bad at remembering. It's Lidia Gonzalez 66, but I don't know if there you go. There's no period in it. There you go. So you could do that. I'm relatively new to this, to be quite honest. I'm relatively new to this.
Yes.
But
Well,
you can reach out that way.
And Heidi's going to flash your book again.
Yeah,
through
you can find
Corwin,
that.
if you don't have it yet, we highly recommend.
Yes.
So that's another way to like dig a little deeper and maybe have a conversation with your department as like a book study or
Just a little note
grade
on
level
that. There
team,
is
etc.
actually a book study guide online. So
Oh, perfect.
if you are working with a group of teachers, or you are a teacher that wants to lead a discussion with your colleagues, I mean, you don't have to follow it, but it's free at the Corwin site. You can download it. And for each chapter, there's some questions to consider, some activities to try. So it's like, you read this, try this in your classroom, come back together. These are some things you can talk about. So that's another resource that exists. And if
Love.
you're somewhere I can get to easily, I'm more than willing to come out to schools to talk to teachers and work with teachers. So just reach out and let me know.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being here with us tonight. This was a really fun conversation. I hope that we see you sometime at a math conference. Come be nerds with us.
Yes. I have a few coming up, which actually there's a Make Math Moments conference, which is virtual, coming up next week, and it's free. So if you look up Make Math Moments conference, there's a lot of really good speakers at that. So you can definitely do that. Yeah,
it's a good one.
And like I said, it's free to participate. So
yes,
there's
definitely.
You don't have to leave the house and you don't have to pay for it. So
I know.
it's really convenient.
Sweet.
Yeah, very few places like that anymore. So definitely take advantage.
True enough. Well, thanks so much for being here, and we'll have to have you back.
Thank you. I really enjoyed it, and I would love to come back. Thank you so much.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Excellent. Well, that was fun. Obviously, we could sit with her for a long time and have lots of conversation.
I know. Well, I'm thinking, we had the conversation at school council about like what electives should happen. And I'm like,
Oh, I think that it would be a great place for it too. Love. All right. Well, we're going to be seeing you after Thanksgiving on November 30th when we will be interviewing Kim Rimby. And that should be a good conversation.
Yes.
But until then,
we hope that you keep math creative, curious, and inclusive for everyone. Have a great